All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get started then. Today we're gonna talk about, there's a chicken, and I have a confession to make. I went over budget at the grocery store. Get out. Okay, so anyways, I was grocery shopping. Spent way too... Okay, so I'm just gonna sit here now with the bird on my shoulder because that's what we do here. Aww.
Goodbye. He doesn't like you anymore.
Okay. Oh, I'm furloughed right now. I don't have any money coming in, which means I have to be extra cautious about what money I do have going out. I've gotten pretty creative about how I'm feeding my family. Make everything from scratch, looking up lots of recipes, just make sure I'm utilizing all the resources that I have. So I was at the grocery store and I was kind of shocked by the price of jelly. I've made jelly many times over the last several years. I usually can a few jars at a time. It lasts us a few months. It tastes better, the kids love it, and it's just really easy to do. At the store that I was at, the jelly was over $4 for one jar of jelly. I decided I was gonna make some. So I went back to the juice aisle, got a thing of Concord grape juice. I have sugar at home, and I picked up some pectin. Altogether, I think it probably cost me $7 to get the ingredients that I didn't have. And compared to the $4 that it would have cost for one jar of jelly, I'm gonna get at least 4 or 5 with the $7. So I'm gonna show you real quick something that I do. It's real quick to throw together and it's gonna be lots of fun. All right, this is the grape juice that I got. You can see here, no sugar added. You also wanna make sure that there's no vitamin C added. So I got my Sure-Gel pectin. This is what I need. This will make your jelly gel. Otherwise it's gonna be liquid like a syrup. So that's what the pectin does. And I have my sugar. These are the canning supplies that I'm gonna be using. This right here measures head space. Head space is the amount of space between your actual jelly and your lid. But I'm gonna show you a little tip that I have. So if you look at the jar from here, you have this line here, this one, and this one. So if you, oh, this jar is dirty, whatever. So if you I'm not using it, so it's not a big deal. So if you don't have this tool, which shows the headspace, it has the measurements written on it. If you don't have that, you can use these lines on your jar as a guide. You can use them as a guide. If your recipe calls for 1/4 inch headspace, you're gonna fill it up to this line here. If it calls for 1/2 inch of headspace, you're gonna fill it up to this line here. And then if you have a recipe that calls for 1 inch, you're gonna go right to here. Those are approximate, but they're good enough measurements. So if you don't have a tool to measure your headspace, you can use these lines on your jar as a guide. All you need is a pretty deep pan, something that is deep enough that you have 1 inch of water over the top of your mason jar. I have my Presto pressure canner. I will not be using it as a pressure canner. I'll be using it as a water bath, which is essentially just boiling water. So I have my canner that I'm using, and then I also have an electric kettle. I'm gonna keep boiling water standing by. If I put my jelly jars in and the water level is not high enough, I'm gonna quickly need to add some boiling water. So it's important when you're making jelly though that you only wanna make one batch at a time. If you try to double it up, 9 times out of 10, you will not, your jelly will not gel. It's really important that before you start canning, before you attempt it, if you're a first timer, if you've never done it before, that you really understand the science behind canning. Basically, you can't just make a recipe, throw it in a jar, put it in a water bath or put it in a pressure canner and expect good results or expect to have safe food. Before you do anything, I suggest you make sure you really do your research and understand the process, understand what needs to happen. You want to make sure that you are using sterile jars or that you're using new lids, and really look at the USDA guidelines as to how to safely can within your home. Once you understand the science, then you can do things that work for your own kitchen. But if you're just starting out, just make sure that you're really following the guidelines. I'm getting everything prepared at the moment. I cleaned my mason jars, hot soapy water, they're nice and clean. I'm putting them in a preheated oven, which is 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Preheated oven, I'm gonna put it in there for 10 minutes. While I have that going, I'm also going to boil the lids on the stovetop. I'm gonna do that for 10 minutes as well. So once those are done, my jars will be sterilized, my lids will be sterilized, and they'll be ready to be filled with the jelly. What I have going right now, my canner is the pan that I have going for the lid, and I have this pan. This is what I'm going to be making my jelly in. I'll use these to get the jars out of the oven. I'm going to use this to get the lids out of the boiling water. This I'm going to be using when I put the jars into the canner. So I have everything that I need right here, and I also have a clean damp rag. Once I pour everything into the jars, I need to make sure that I'm wiping the rim clear so there's nothing to interfere with the seal. So this water here is coming to a boil, so I'm just going to throw those right in there. I set my timer for 10. So I have my oven going at 350, as you can see. I'm going to get my juice. I'll have to measure that out. I need 3 cups of juice. Mix the juice with the pectin and bring it to a rolling boil. One important thing to remember, and I screw it up every time, I hope I don't today, but when you're pouring the powdered pectin in, make sure you stir it. I want to make sure that I'm stirring it as I pour it in, otherwise it's going to clump. Your jelly is not going to set well. So make sure as you're pouring it in, do a little at a time and make sure you're stirring it in as you go. Bringing this to a boil over high heat. I'm going to bring this to a rolling boil, and then I'm going to add my sugar in. Okay, now I'm going to stir it in until it dissolves, and then I'm going to bring it to a rolling boil that can't be stirred down. Sugar in there, so I'm just going to keep stirring this until all that sugar is dissolved, and it's going to start boiling here pretty soon. The recipe says to boil it for 1 minute. But the one thing with jelly is that you really don't want to rush it. You're going to need to keep boiling it until you start to see it gelling correctly, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Once you see it start gelling, then you know you'll actually get a good set within your jars. If you go too soon, if you just go off of the timer of being 1 minute alone, then there's a good chance that your jelly might not set and you'll end up with syrup instead of jelly. It has some foam on it. Jelly, when you make it, it does end up with some foam, and what you can do when everything's done is you can just use a spoon and you can just skim that off. It's not harmful. If you leave it in your jars, it's absolutely fine. It's just going to look a little frothy at the top of your jar. Your jelly will be completely fine. Everything underneath that layer of foam will be just regular jelly, but it's just not going to have as good of an appearance at the top of your jelly. If you see me throw the camera, that's because I had a boil over. But I'm going to keep stirring this constantly. You can see how I stir it, how that boil is still going. And it's see, use the spoon. Right now we still have syrup. We're not there yet. Using the spoon, that's a good trick. You want to look for it when it starts sticking to the spoon. When it starts sticking to the spoon, you know that you're going to have success with your jars. You're going to have success with your jelly. They're going to set for you because that pectin is at a high enough temperature that it's starting to set. So we're starting to get there. See how it's kind of sticking to it? We're going to go for just a little bit longer. Starting to thicken a little bit. We're getting there. See how it's... Yep, I think we are about there. Yep, we're good. I'm going to turn that off. So I just push that to the back burner. And what you're going to see now, I'm going to start pulling the... Oh boy, see, it's still going. Ah, oh boy. Then I do need to move quick now because it is going to start getting sticky and messy. Now I have all my jars. I'm not going to be using all those jars, but they are in here and available. Have my tongs. And I usually I take 2 out at a time. Here, make sure I have enough space. And I also want to make sure that it's turned so that they're turned in position so I can see those lines. I'm gonna be moving quick now, so bear with me. Going to take this, put it right on the jar. That on there, I'm gonna start scooping into here, remembering that I'm using I'm gonna keep 1/4 inch for headspace. Oh, this looks good. This is gelling really, really well. Okay, that one's filled, and I'm just gonna move this to the next one. Keep going. And I can hear right now, and I can tell that my canner is steaming and ready to go. So as soon as these things are filled, I'm gonna move this, I'm gonna take the lid off of, I'm dripping everywhere. I'm gonna take the lid off the canner and just start placing them in there as I go. One very important thing is you do wanna make sure that the temperature of your jars, if you have hot liquid that you're putting into the jars, you wanna make sure that your jars are hot. If you try putting a hot liquid into a cold jar, it will break. It has happened to me. And you're gonna end up with a big old mess and broken glass everywhere. So it's important that if you are putting a hot food, if you're using a hot food, you're using a hot jar. Of cold food, you're gonna be putting it into a cold jar and putting it into a cold canner. So hot with hot, cold with cold. Before I put the lids on, I'm taking a clean rag and just wiping the rim of these, making sure that there's no jelly because I want to make sure that there's nothing between the glass jar and the lid. Those are nice and clean. That there. And I'm just going to screw these on, and these should just be fingertip tight. I don't want them too tight or it may cause the lid to buckle. And be careful because this jar is very hot. Jelly in the jars, lids on the jars. I'm going to use my grabber here, my jar lifter, squeeze it on there and just drop it in. Have those two done. We're gonna keep moving quick and fill 2 more. It's hard to tell, but you can see that they are submerged. There is at least 1 inch of water over the top of those. Once it comes to a rolling boil when it's covered, then I'm gonna start my timer for 10 minutes. Can you hear it? So I hear it bubbling right now. I hear it bubbling. I'm gonna set my timer now. Put it on for 10 minutes. Okay, that is done. Oh gosh, turn the timer off. As you can see in here, got all 4 jars. Things are looking good. I'm gonna give it 5 minutes and then we can pull those out. You gotta try some? I'm gonna leave them here on this towel, leave them here overnight. You wanna make sure that they are 100% completely cooled before you touch them, before you mess with the lids, before you try to take the rings off. Once they're out of the canner, you set them on the towel and walk away. I hope you enjoy seeing what I do to stay cost effective and how I feed my family. Trying to keep grocery bills down while I get through being furloughed. What I ended up with today on this batch that I made, I ended up with 4 half pints of jelly, but I also have enough for a whole nother batch. For what I made today, the cost is about the same of what I would have spent in the grocery store for the same amount of jelly, but I still have enough to make another batch. I still have pectin. I have pectin in my cabinet, so I'm gonna use that and I can make a whole nother batch. So really I doubled my money, if you think about it. What I would have spent at the grocery store on jelly, I actually got double the product for the same price. So that's my little tip for the day. We're gonna leave it to Sky. Are you ready?
Subscribe, make sure you hit the notification bell down below.
What? Make sure you like and hit subscribe. Hit that notification bell down below.
And if you have any questions,
put it in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.
That's what I want to say.
Keep spinning. Keep spinning. Oh, okay. Bye.